Good evening. My name's Karen Milnes from Future Generations University. Sorry. Welcome to our series, our monthly series, Out of the Woods, Enriching Your Maple Business. This is a free webinar series for maple enthusiasts and forestry professionals to take a deeper dive into understanding the syrup making process. If you're attending tonight's webinar, you will automatically be registered for future webinars in the series and receive the links and descriptions in your email the day prior to each webinar. So stay tuned for more. And tonight we have Mike Rechlin from Future Generations University talking to us tonight.
All right. Are we on?
Mm-hmm.
Are we ready?
Yep, you got it. Yes.
Okay. Well, good evening, and thanks for zooming in this evening and joining us. I promised to have this completed, this little session completed before the presidential debates tonight, but if anybody would rather stick around and talk about trees with me, that may be a better use of our time, and I'm happy to do that. Happy to do that with you. This is a talk on science, okay? We're going to talk about the science behind the sweetness, all right? We're going to talk about the science of sap flow. And in the process, we're going to make mention of evolutionary biology, chemistry, tree anatomy, physiology, physics, biology. We're going to bring a lot of science topics together and apply them to the issue of sap and sap flow in trees. All right. At this point, we should be, if we're all on tune, we should be looking at one of the photo or a video that is dear to the heart of any maple syrup maker. It just doesn't get any better, all right? And it just doesn't get any more exciting than in the springtime when that sap starts to flow. You've got a bucket out there or a tube, and it's coming through those tubes, and you're back in the maple syrup business again. As we go through this, I'd like to, Zoom sessions, some of us Zoom around way too much these days of COVID, that we can't get together and chat. And I'm going to try to make this more than just a lecture, okay, but really a discussion. And the way I'm going to try to do that is by periodically asking you all questions. And you can think about those questions. You can answer those questions in the chat box if you wish. You can sit there and do nothing about the questions. But I'm going to periodically try to kind of engage you in this process of learning about trees, tree biology, and sap flow in maple trees. And so my first question, as we move through here, is I'd like you to tell me, or to think about, on that video, we put a hole in the tree, we hung a bucket in it. Why is the sap coming out? That's the first question. I'm just going to give you just a little bit of time, not much. As I said, you can answer this in the chat box, or you can just think about it. But I'd like you to think about what you know about why you think this might be happening. That's kind of a mystery, right? I mean, drill a hole in the tree and the sap comes out. How come? What's going on? And in the process of this seminar, we're going to answer that, so that by the end of the session, you'll have the answer if you don't have it at this point. Maybe you do. So take a look at that for a little bit and try to tell me why the water is coming out of that tree. It's an interesting proposition. While you're doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, okay? As I was announced, my name's Mike Rechlin. This, by the way, is, my wife claims, the best picture ever taken of me. Okay. And I'm with Future Generations University here in Franklin, West Virginia. I had prior to this, I've been with the West Virginia Department of Agriculture. And in both institutions, my role has been, or my title has been, Maple Commodity Specialist. So I've been working with folks in the maple industry in and around West Virginia as a commodity specialist here. I am unsuccessfully retired, or I'd probably be doing something else this evening. All right. In a career, I was a forestry professor, natural resource professor at a number of different colleges. And I'd always tell people, well, what I really do is I help students get their heads into trees. And that's where the genesis of this picture obviously came from. I want people to understand trees, okay, in a little deeper way than they might. Been doing it with students, and now I'm doing it with you. And tonight, we're going to try to get our heads into trees and kind of understand a little bit more about how these creatures we share the planet with really do work. Now, I'm here just to talk at you, but the star of the show is a tree, okay? And it's a maple tree. Okay. It could be, for this talk, it could be a birch tree, could be a walnut tree, could be a beech tree, could be a sycamore tree. All those trees will have sap flow out of it if you put a hole in it. They'll all respond just like that bucket we saw at the beginning, with the sap flowing out of the spile and filling up that bucket. All right. They're different species and they work a little bit differently, but they all will do that. Now, when we talk about making maple syrup, we're obviously focusing primarily on maple trees. And that can be sugar maple, appropriately named for its sweet sap. It could be silver maple, could be red maple, could be Norway maple, could be Japanese maple. If it's a maple, it'll work the same way. It'll give you similar results. There's even a maple I'm just learning about, although I've been in forestry all my career. In Ohio, my Ohio friends have a silver red hybrid maple that they're tapping there. So any maple is gonna give you that same response. Now, what we're gonna try to do in this session tonight, we're talking about the science behind sap flows. We're gonna try to think like a tree, all right? We're gonna try to figure out from the tree's perspective why that sap drips out of that tree. What's going on? What makes it do this? So tonight we're gonna teach you how to think like a tree. And we're gonna start out by recognizing that trees have problems. All right, we all have problems, right? I mean, we wake up, we solve problems, we think about things, we come to solutions. We do this all the time. Well, trees have problems too. All right. And they don't look left and right before they decide to try, cross a road solving a problem, but they solve problems evolutionarily. They're faced with issues. They evolve around solutions to those issues. So trees have problems. We've got to deal with that. One of the problems trees face is they face the problem of winter. Okay. Trees, like you and I, or not you and I, but like humans, evolved in the tropics. That's where their native habitat was. And as they moved north, they had to deal with the problem of winter. All right. Here's my second question for you, and these are pretty simple questions, but they're ways to engage. What did we do? What did humans do? We evolved in the tropics. We had to deal with the problem of winter. How do we solve it? How do we make it up here in these cold climes? So think about that for a minute. What did we do to evolve and live with winter? In the tropical regions of the earth, there is no winter. Summer, spring, fall, winter basically looks all the same. And the daylight doesn't change that much. But suddenly we got winter. Well, your answer should look something like this. All right. As we move north, we learned about putting on more clothing. The further north we moved, the colder it got, the more clothes we put on. And that's how we keep ourselves warm, our warm-bodied animals, and stop us from freezing. By the way, if you went back to those palm trees in the last slide and you planted them in your backyard here in West Virginia or Wisconsin or wherever you're from, they would do really well in the summertime, but in the wintertime, they wouldn't do very well, okay? They'd die quickly because they didn't evolve for that climate. But yet our maple trees did, okay? They figured out a way around that problem. And the way they figured it out is partially related to another thing that we figured out if we're going to have to deal with winter. And that's the second photo in this slide, bottle of antifreeze. If I didn't put that in my car's engine in the winter, I'd pretty soon be walking, right? That's a solution to a problem that we evolved for things that aren't warm-blooded like you and I to make it through winter. All right, trees have problems. They've got the problem of winter. Now, this is a science seminar, all right? And scientists do experiments. And so I've devised a number of experiments that are going to lead us through this problem of winter and lead us to the solutions that trees evolved in order to move into the more northerly climates. Now, these are pretty simple experiments, okay? All that I needed to do them was found in my kitchen. And the major piece of experimental equipment that I needed was the freezer part of my refrigerator. And so we're going to do a number of different experiments here. Science. We're doing science, guys. This is kind of fun. So in my first experiment, I took a piece of lettuce out of the crisper drawer. I put it into a beaker or some kind of container I had there. I then put it in the freezer. I came back the next morning and it looked like that after I had it out of the freezer for a little bit. So my third question for you, okay, what happened to the lettuce? Why don't you store your lettuce in your freezer? Wouldn't it keep longer? That's where I store my ice cream, store my steaks. What's going on there? What happened in this experiment to the lettuce that I put in the freezer? Give you just a second on that one. See if you know what's going on. Something happened. Okay. Your answer, as you thought that through so diligently, should be that the live cells in that lettuce froze. When they froze, they burst. And so with all the live cells having burst, it has no structure. And when I took it out and it thawed, it was basically wilted. So it's freezing of live cells. That's part of the issue with plants when they moved into the northern climates. They got to figure out a way around that. Okay, one problem they've got. We're going to look at another experiment now, okay? This time, I took an empty vinegar bottle. I filled it with water. I put it in my freezer overnight. I came out the next day and it looked like that. Okay. Yeah, that's what my wife said. Oop. What happened? What happened there? What happened to that bottle of water that I put in there? The next day, the bottle was all broken, glass shards everywhere, water, ice, you know, the whole mess. And we all know, pretty simple experiment here, that what happens is when water freezes, it expands. And when it expands, it broke the vessel that it's in. Well, trees have that same problem. They've got water in them, okay? Which is going to expand when it freezes, going to break cells in there, and they've got to evolve. They had to evolve a mechanism to get around this problem. This is a long way towards figuring out why sap flows in the spring, but it's very, very important to understand this if you want to really know what's going on there. You want the tree's perspective on this. All right, I got one more experiment. This one's a little bit more difficult, okay? So in my third experiment, I I took a plastic bottle. I've got enough trouble on the glass in the refrigerator to not to use a glass bottle this time. Took a plastic bottle, filled it up with water, okay, put it in the freezer, came back the next day, and it looked like that. It didn't break the plastic, it expanded, okay? The plastic had the capability to get bigger, but it did change color. I put in water, it came out milk. Huh, maybe, looks like it, okay. Question. Next question on your quiz, guys. What happened? Why did my nice clear water end up looking like milk? Think about that for a minute. See what you can come up with. Meanwhile, I'll catch up to myself here. All right, we're going to leave that, but we're going to come back to it. We're going to leave that issue of why that's no, we'll answer it right now. What happened and what happens is when water freezes, gases, little gas bubbles, okay, come out of solution. As water gets colder and freezes, gas bubbles come out of solution. And those gas bubbles are forming small gas bubbles, air, okay, are forming the white of that bottle. Okay. That's why when you look at an ice cube, you put water in your ice cube tray, you take the ice cubes out, and they've got this whitish hue to the center of the ice cube. Well, here, because we had a top on it, the whole thing turned white with gas bubbles in the frozen water. We're going to learn a little bit here that's kind of a problem for trees. Those gas bubbles in that frozen water. All right, we're going to look now at something else. We're going to take a look at how wood is put together, a little wood anatomy lecture, if you will. This is an electron microphoto of a piece of wood. It happens to be red maple, okay? And as we look at this, I'm going to describe a little bit about what we're looking at here. The large dark holes, as you're looking down from the top on this, are vessels, okay? And those vessels are responsible for sap flow. They're responsible for bringing water from the roots up to the leaves in the springtime. They're also what you tap into when you drill a hole in a tree and the sap moves on into your hole and out your spile and into your bucket. They're responsible for sap flow in the tree. Okay. There's also and also this is real interesting, or at least to me, real important. These vessels are evenly distributed throughout the annual ring. If you go from the right side of the top to the left side, you see that there's an even distribution of those vessels. And then you see the end of an annual ring, which is just a little line going across diagonally across the top there, about 2/3 of the way through the diagram. So they're evenly distributed. We refer to those as a diffuse porous wood. The pores or the vessels are diffused throughout the wood. Now here's an interesting thing, guys, to know. Any diffuse porous wood, any diffuse porous hardwood theoretically will flow sap in the springtime. And any ring porous, if they're all not diffused like that, if they're kind of bunched up on the ring, will not. Okay. So you can tap diffuse porous hardwoods are maples, okay, they're birches, they're beeches, tulip poplar. I've never seen tulip poplar sap, but theoretically it would flow. On the other hand, those ring pores, if they're all bunched up and not evenly distributed, like oak, ash, and hickory, you can tap those all you want. You're not going to get anything. They're a different type of wood species. So it's a diffuse porous hardwood. We got vessels evenly distributed across the wood diagram. You've got those small holes. Those small holes are fibers, and those are the structural thick cell walls of a piece of wood. My lettuce didn't have any fibers. That's why it wilted. you could put the wood in the freezer, and obviously it wouldn't wilt like the lettuce because of the structure of those fibers. And then you've got rays or radial files of cells. And these rays go from the outside of the tree on inside, kind of like the rays of a sun, all right? Go right into the center of the tree. And those rays, unlike vessels and fibers, they're live cells. Okay, so those rays are live cells. If a tree is going to make it through the winter, it's got to do something to stop those live cells from bursting, like what happened on the lettuce experiment. All right, so that's how wood is put together. That's how maple wood is put together. That happens to be a red maple. Let's take a look at this. So winter's a problem. And as I like to say, trees are in a fix. They're down there in the tropics. They'd like to move up into the northern climates, but in order to do it, they've got to stop their live cells from freezing and bursting. They'd be dead. And their dead cells in the vessels primarily, but also in the fibers, are all filled with gas bubbles when it freezes. They look like that whitish example of the bottle. That's a problem. We're going to talk about the whitish bubbles in the vessels here in a little bit. They're in a fix, but they got an idea, an evolutionary idea. They figured out a way to solve these problems. Not quickly, but they figured it out, and it allowed them to start to move woody structures from the tropics up into the northern regions. All right, I've got another experiment, okay? Experiment number 4. This time, I took a bottle of maple syrup. I put it in my freezer. The next morning, I took that bottle of maple syrup out. What happened? What would happen if I took a bottle of maple syrup, put it in the freezer, the next morning, there's your next question, what's going to happen? What's it going to look like? The answer's right there, okay? You put the maple syrup in, you freeze it, you bring it out the next morning, a glass bottle. If it expanded, it would break that bottle. And your answer should be, it did not freeze. You've heard the saying, slow as molasses? Well, it's slow as maple syrup in a freezer, all right? But it's not frozen. It still is in a liquid state. And the reason for that is the same reason as we antifreeze in our car come wintertime, it's going to get cold. And that's that dissolved solids in a liquid lower the freezing point. So dissolved solids in a liquid lower the freezing point. Dissolved solids, sugars in maple syrup, lower the freezing point of the maple syrup. So the bottle doesn't freeze. All right, well, that's interesting, okay? So my tree out there can make sugars all summer, photosynthesis, move them around in the tree with its vessels and other mechanisms. It can store those sugars in live cells. And in this diagram here, we've got them stored both as S, which symbolizes sugars, and also as a little star, which symbolizes a starch grain, okay? Trees basically store sugars as sugar dissolved and also as starch grains, which are not dissolved. And by doing that, they can put a whole lot more sugar. Starch is a much more concentrated form of energy, okay? Starch is in wheat, it's in corn, it's in any seed, okay, stores that energy. And it can change that starch into sugar anytime it needs it and put more sugar in the cell. So it's kind of like, you need more antifreeze, put more sugars in. You need a little less, put them back in starches. But it's got the ability to change that back and forth. And this results in a situation where your live cells have the antifreeze in them and they don't freeze. All right, so that's pretty cool. That's one way that they evolved to live in the northern climate. The fix to the fix, as I like to say. Live cells freeze and burst. Well, we solved that one. All we got to do is store enough sugar so that we can lower the freezing point of water, and we don't have that issue to deal with. But trees also still have these dead cells, and the vessels of these dead cells are filled with gas bubbles, and that's still a problem. Okay, when the water in those vessels thaws, and they're not filled with sugar. Okay, not initially anyhow. They will be eventually. They're full with these gas bubbles, and the gas bubbles are going to cause us a problem. And what is that problem? Let's think a little bit about that problem. The problem is after winter, there's spring. Okay, we're coming out of winter, we're getting into spring. Our live cells are just fine, but our dead cells are filled with bubbles. That's a problem. Why is it a problem? Let's look at that for a little bit. It's a problem because in the springtime, those vessels in the summertime are needed for something else. They're not needed to give you sugary sap to flow into your bucket, okay? At this point, the tree needs them to absorb water through its roots, transport that water up through its stem, out through its leaves, into its leaves, and out through little holes in the bottom of the leaves called stomates. The water evaporates out, comes in through the bottom, evaporates on out the top. And the reason that this all happens is because with the water brought into the tree's roots are also nutrients. And the nutrients, I don't have it described on here, basically flow freely through a river moving up through the tree. And it's the water that's transporting those nutrients up to the leaves. So in the springtime, the trees need to be ready to do this. All right. Well, here's the issue, okay? Water molecules, a little bit of chemistry here, are what we refer to as polar molecules. They have a little bit of a negative side to them and a little bit of a positive side to them. Now, from our years as kids playing with magnets, we know that unlike charges attract. Negatives attract positives, positives attract negatives, and like charges repel. Remember playing with magnets? That's just kind of the way that worked. Well, what helps that water move on up through the transpiration, we call it transpiration, kind of like sweating, but not exactly. Transpiration stream is this hydrogen bonding between the negative and the positive charge of the molecule. So long as those water molecules are close enough together so that the positives and the negatives are attracting each other, as one molecule moves on up and out into the air through the leaf, stomate, another one is dragged back on in through the root, and the system works. Left-hand side. Right-hand side, I've got an air bubble in there. The air bubble keeps the water molecules from being close enough together for that hydrogen bonding to work. That's a problem. Next question for you. If a tree broke bud without having its water column clear of bubbles, if it had a bubble in it and it immediately broke bud, what might happen? What do you think would happen to that right-hand column if suddenly spring appeared and the tree wasn't ready for it? Okay, what would happen would be the water molecules above the bubble would move on out to the stomates, but they wouldn't be able to drag the one below the bubble, and the whole system would not work. The tree would functionally be broken. It would have a broken transportation system in it. And it's got to figure out some way to fix that and get rid of those bubbles before springtime, or it's in big trouble, okay? It simply wouldn't work. It would be a broke broke biological system there. So what we got to do is we got to take a system that looks like this. We've got our vessel elements. We also have the vessels back there. And we got these gas bubbles in it because when it froze, okay, the gas bubbles came out of solution and they're sitting in there. And as long as they're there, the water is just not going to move on up through those vessels and out the stomates. And we got to change it into a system that looks like the one on the right, where it's all water, no bubbles, bottom of the root to the top of the tree, so that the water can be drawn on up through hydrogen bonding and out the stomates. So for the tree to work, for the system to work, it's got to figure out, evolve a mechanism that's going to change the left-hand picture to the right-hand picture. Time for a little scratching of its leaves, right? A little scratching of its head and trying to figure this one out. All right, here's experiment, or really question number 5. Okay, and question number 5 is, oh, I'm sorry, question number 8. I looked at my numbers wrong here. For you to tell me or think about is, why is there fizz in the soda? It's a bottle of Sprite, could be a bottle of Coke, whatever your preference is. Why is there fizz in that? We know there is, okay? That's why we buy it. That's what makes it enjoyable to drink. But why is it there? The answer to that relates to basic property of physics, Henry's gas law. And Henry's gas law, one of the laws of the universe, I guess here, is that gases under pressure dissolve in a liquid. There's the formula for it if you want to get technical and solve it. But gases put under pressure dissolve in liquid. So that Sprite bottle had some nice sweet, sugary stuff. And then there was carbon dioxide pressurized in that. And the carbon dioxide dissolved under pressure in that bottle of Sprite. Good enough, but so what? Okay. Here's my experiment. I shake up the bottle of soda. I open the top of the bottle. And I get that. Okay. What's coming out? Bubbles. What's coming out? Liquid and gases. Okay. As I release the pressure from that system, took the top off, the gas and the liquid flowed on out of the soda bottle. Hold on, pretty soon we're going to be telling you why sap flows, okay? But we're getting there. So the tree basically is faced with the problem of this slide right here. And my question to you, it's one we've already answered, but we'll ask it again, is how do I get the gases, the bubbles, back into solution? Because that's fundamentally what the tree's got to do. It's got gases in its vessels. It's got to get them into solution. How's it going to do it? How can it do it? The answer, as I said, we've already talked about before, is through pressure, okay? By adding pressure to the system, those gases will dissolve in a liquid. That's what Henry's gas law tells us. Science, science, science. I love experiments. All right, so one day I went out in my backyard during sap flow season. I drilled a hole in the tree, and instead of putting a tap and a bucket and collecting the sap, I took the pressure gauge off my pump in the basement, and I basically screwed it into the tree. And this is what I got. I got pressure. Why? Why is the tree building up pressure? Why? Because it's got to dissolve those gas bubbles that came out of solution when the vessels froze. It's got to get them back into solution. And it pressurizes the trunk in order to dissolve the gas bubbles. Now, 10 pounds of pressure, that's a lot of pressure, okay? I've had, you know, classes of students and folks, and I've given them this and said, put that in your mouth and blow 10 pounds. They can't even blow 2 pounds, okay? It's a lot of pressure. If your car tire was down to 10 pounds, you could still drive it to the gas station. I wouldn't suggest driving it, you know, to New York or anything. You could drive it to the gas station and pump it up. You're still okay. That's still a lot of pressure in there. It's enough pressure to push sap through wood. And to push anything through wood is going to take a lot, right? It's a lot of pressure in there. That tree's building up internally a lot of pressure. You can, in fact, take and put a tape around the tree, and if you did it very accurately, you could measure the increase in diameter of the tree during the day when the pressure in the tree built up, okay? It's enough to make the tree's diameter larger. All right, that's a pretty cool experiment right there. So I put a tap in my tree. The tree's pressurized, just like your tire is pressurized, and you put a hole in it. The air is going to come out. Here, the tree is pressurized. You put a hole in it, and the gas is going to come. The sap is going to come out. But just like the soda bottle, so is the gas going to come out. All right. So in fact, you don't see it here, but if you're running a sap line, a 3/16 or 5/16 sap line, you'll see gas bubbles as well as liquid sap coming out of that tree because you basically popped the top on the soda bottle by putting a hole in the tree and releasing the pressure, internal pressure in the trunk of the tree. So if we went back to that first slide, now we can say, okay, why is the sap coming out of the tree when you put a hole in it? And the answer is we've evolved to, okay, gotten ourselves to, is because the tree is pressurized. And why is the tree pressurized? It's pressurized, it doesn't do it because it likes you, okay? It wants to give you this sap. It does it because it's got to clean out these bubbles so it's ready for its bud break and the new leaves to appear. Now we're going to take a look at another experiment. This one I didn't do. I would have loved to have thunk this one up. But my friend Steve Childs, who has a really interesting mind for this type of stuff, and friends up at Cornell University did this. And what they did is they've got, in this picture you see, they've got a clock, okay, that's 8:40 in the morning. It's got a thermometer on it. It's 32 degrees, okay? They've got a pressure gauge on that tree, so you're going to be able to see changes in pressure in the tree. And they've also got a tube going into a sap bucket. Now, this will take 4 eyes, but I want you to see all 4 of those at the same time. I want you to watch the time. I want you to watch the temperature. I want you to watch the pressure. And then if you can, keep an eye on what's going on in the bucket at the same time. So Kate here, my assistant, is now going to, am I going to do it?
Oh, it's running.
Oh, it's running. Okay. Take a look at how the pressure is built up. Time, look at the time. Okay, 12 o'clock, it's warm. Okay, nice warm day. Look at the sap flowing into that bucket. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Look, now watch closely. That pressure gauge is dropping down. Suddenly there's no pressure. Whoop, what's happened? It's gone negative. It's on the bottom of 0. What's a negative pressure? A suck, okay? Now it's 10 o'clock at night, okay? 24 degrees, really cold, okay? And as the night continues on, it gradually works its way back up to 0. But there's a period of time there when we had quite a negative pressure. We're back to 0, 5 in the morning, okay? And I guess that's as far as it goes. But you can you really should play this numerous times, okay? Do you want to play that again, Kate? Can we do that?
I'm sorry.
If she can do that, that would be fun to, we got a little bit of time here just to play it 2 times. This is really pretty cool stuff and pretty simple. I mean, this is simple science. We'll watch it one more time because it's hard to see all those things. Okay. Look at that pressure gauge go up. And the bucket starts to fill up. Getting in the afternoon, pressure starting to drop down. Oh, and that's getting, you know, later in the day, that pressure is going down. Still pretty warm, so you got some pressure. Now it's down to 30. Oh, okay, below freezing, pressure's to 0. And suddenly at 26, you know, as soon as you get that cold spike, it really drops negative. All right, so that's really pretty cool. What you're seeing here is that during the daytime, the tree builds up pressure when it warms, okay? The sap flows out of the tree because of the pressure buildup in the stem, and we know why it's building up pressure. It's got to clean out those vessels. As it goes towards dark, okay, it kind of, the pressure decreases a little bit, okay? As it gets into the point of the day when it's cold, freezing, suddenly the pressure goes negative, quite negative, and then it turns around and comes back towards the 0 stage. It's a cyclic thing, a buildup of positive pressure during the day, forcing sap out of the tree through the wood, forcing sap through the wood and out of the tree into your bucket. Turning around at night, okay, and you get a negative pressure on that, okay? A negative pressure is a suck. And what it's doing there, and you can't see it in the bucket, unfortunately, because I'm not sure why, but you can't see it. But at nighttime, basically that the tree will suck water sap back out of that bucket, back into the tree. What the tree is doing there is recharging. Think about it. You take 2 gallons of sap out of the tree during the daytime, you've got to replace it with liquid, or the tree would simply shrivel up like an old prune, okay? And you need those negative pressure or suck times when you're bringing water up from the roots to recharge, to be ready for the sap flow the next day. So you need those positive pressures during the day, followed by negative pressures at night to recharge. If you don't get that, if you don't get a freezing period, it'll flow for a while and flow less and less and less, and eventually dribble on off, okay? Because you've got to have that recharge. You got to bring water back up to replace what was left. All right, so let's kind of bring things to closure here, or look back at things. 4 questions about maple dormancy and sap flow that now you know the answers to. Somebody can say, why is the sap sweet? Well, it stores all that sugar in its live cells in the summertime as sugars and starches, and is ready to move it on in the spring. And actually, the tree needs the sugars to grow new leaves. So there's another mechanism going on in here. It also needs those sugars to transport up its bowl to grow its new crown in the spring. That takes energy. Why does sap flow out when you put a hole in a tree? It flows out because it's a pressurized system, and you put a hole in a pressurized system, and what's under pressure is gonna flow out. To keep sap flowing, what has to happen next? Well, you really gotta have that negative. You gotta have the negative pressure, those freeze periods, okay, in order to recharge the tree and get it ready for the next positive pressure flow period. And why does it happen best in the spring? Note I didn't say only in the spring, but best in the spring. Happens best in the spring. That's the time we tap our trees, because that's when you have most of these freeze-thaw cycles. And it's that freeze-thaw cycle that's necessary to keep the whole system going. All right, so there's 4 things you know about sap flow. I like to end it with a slide like this because those kids in there have got another 50 questions to ask you, okay? They've got full of questions, and you know four of the important ones now. You can explain to them a little bit about tree biology, physiology, sap flow, put all those things together, but they'll have many more for you before they leave your sugar bush happy at the samples you gave them and the talk you gave to them about why maple syrup happens. But now's your time if you have any other questions for me, or I guess there's some other folks out there who we could also draw on to answer questions about sap flow as well. As Karen said in the introduction, this session is on science, the science of tree sap flow. We've got another session coming up on climate and tree sap flow. We'll be talking, numerous other sessions as we go through the months here to learn more and more about this marvelous thing of making maple syrup. So, yours. If you have any questions, shoot them my way.
Hi, folks. This is Kate, Mike's technical assistant for the night. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat box or the Q&A section. And if you would like to speak, please raise your hand and we will try to give you the ability to unmute. But know that there's a lot of people on this call. But thank you.
All right, we have a question from Luke Taylor.
Yes.
Can I see it here?
No, why don't you read it to me?
Okay.
You unmute, yeah.
So Luke asks, what are the most important variables in dictating varying sugar content between species or location?
Oh, that's a sugar content. There are years that the trees are sweet. There are years that the trees are not sweet. Some trees, I like to say, just like some people, are sweeter than others. Some are just a little sour. That's genetic, okay? Good years, bad years is thought to be mostly environmental. A lot of sunshine, a lot of water, make a lot of sugars in the summer, store a lot of sugars, got a lot of sugars available to give you sweetness in the sap flow seasons. A lot of factors going on there. That's some's genetics and some's environmental.
Along those same lines, we have another question that says, later in the sap season, is it true that the sap becomes less sweet? And if so, is that because it has more starches in it than sugars?
That is a very good question. And I may get myself in trouble with some of my other sugar maker friends here on this one. But yes, early in the season, the sap tends to have less sugars in it. As you move through the season, the sugar content increases. And then later in the season, the sugar content starts to drop again. And I'm going to pose to you a hypothesis and then tell you a little bit. First, I'll tell you about an experiment I did, quite by mistake, okay? I tapped a tree, a maple tree in my backyard, tapped 5 of them, in fact, and I tapped them on April 13th. Now, that's about as late as it possibly gets in the sugaring season here in West Virginia. Normally, we're done by the middle of March. April 13th, I tapped those trees. I had 5+% sugar content in all those trees. It was right off there. In fact, when I did it, I said my measurement, is wrong. My refractometer is wrong. But I've come to think, and this is a hypothesis later on, that no, I don't think my refractometer is wrong. And Les, you're on here, and Abby, you may hit me over the head if you're on here, but I think that those trees can't constantly increase in sugar content, but that the sugar content around the tap hole has been depleted by the sap, sweet sap flowing out of that tree. And so thusly your sugar content decreases. That may be very wrong. It dilutes it, yeah, because you've used up the stored sugars in the wood area immediately around the tap hole. That's a hypothesis. I don't know anybody who's ever tried tapping trees on middle of April. I did it really for another reason and thought I was getting some erroneous data, but now I think it's probably okay. but you should try it. Try a late season tapping, see what happens.
All right, we have another question from Russ. It says, the Farmer's Almanac and my local West Virginia forester think we might have an early tapping season. What's your opinion?
Oh, boy. I usually consult my oracle, okay? I do a few dances.
Does Kate do that too?
And, you know, Kate does that too.
Thanks, Mike.
Next week,
Yeah.
stay tuned, okay? The next session is going to be on weather, climate, because that is a key question. What's happening as we know this. We know this, that as climate has changed, we are tapping earlier. There's no question about that. But yeah, next, stay tuned on that one, guys. We're all going to learn a little bit about weather and climate from Aaron Reitman here in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, what I usually do is I check in with people who I think know more about maple syrup tapping than I do. And when they tap their trees, I do mine too.
All right. That might be, oh, let's see. Next month's session. Oh, that's from Kate. That might be it for questions. Did you have an exit poll or did you want to have people put their numbers in? Okay. Yeah. You want to talk about
Yeah.
it?
Hi, folks. I just launched an exit poll. It's just to have you all tell us if this was helpful, if this is going to be helpful for you in your operation. Please feel free to fill it out. This doesn't mean that we have to end the webinar right now. We're just going to get it up because last time I forgot to. So trying to get it done a little earlier rather than later. And then we'll have a second poll, and that is for people who need continuing forestry education credits. If y'all need it, you did indicate it in your registration, but this just helps us cross-reference to make sure folks who actually attended get credit for the webinar. Thank you.
And I just want to say thanks for taking your time tuning in. I hope you learned a little bit about tree biology, what makes things work out there, and I hope that it'll all make sense to you as you go around and tap your trees and kind of have a better understanding of the systems you're working with.
We'll let the poll run a little longer.
Should I mute now?
You can mute it. Everyone's kind of just saying